Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Janvalabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari. Jaya Gopi Janvalabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tire Vanachari Yamuna Tire Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jagannatha, Jagannatha, Baladevai Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Radha Vallabha, Radha Vallabha Shri Radhe. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे, हरे बोल श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये। नास्तप्रैष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया। भगवते उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। So we are reading from 6th canto, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam 6th canto, chapter 4, Tamsa Guhya prayers, verse 25. Deha sva asahokshya manavo bhutamatram. Deho asahavo aksha manavo bhutamatram. Deho asahavo aksha manavo bhutamatram. Atmanam anyam cha vidhu param yat. Atmanam anyam cha vidhu param yat. Sarvam pumhan veda gunams cha tajno. Sarvam puman veda gunams cha tajno. Na Veda Sarvagnam Anantamidehe. Na Veda Sarvagnam Anantamidehe. Deho asavo akshamanavo bhutamatram. Atmanam anyam cha vidhu param yat. Sarvam puman veda gunam satajno. Na veda sarvagnam anantamidehe. Devo asavo akshamanavo bhutamatram. Atmanam anyam cha vidhu param yat. Sarvam puman veda gunam shajagno. Veda sarvam. Devo asavo akshamanavo bhutamatram. Atmanam anyam cha vidhu param yat. Sarvam puman veda gunam satajno. Na veda sarvam gnam anantamide. Deho asavo akshamanavo bhutamatram. Atma chavidu paramya. Veda sarvam namidante. Deha, this body. Asahava, the life airs. Akshaha, the different senses. Manava, the mind, understanding, intellect and ego. Bhutamatram, the five gross material elements and the sense objects, form, taste, sound and so on. Atmanam, themselves. Anyam, any other. Cha, and. Vidu, no. Param, beyond. Yat, that which. Sarvam, everything. Puman, the living being. Veda, knows. Gunan, the qualities of the material nature. Cha, and. Tatgna, knowing those things. Na, not. Veda, knows. Sarvagnam, onto the omniscient. Anantam, the unlimited. Ide, I offer my respectful obeisances. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Translation. Because they are only matter, the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the five gross elements and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of the other senses or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life airs, the senses, the elements and the sense objects, and he can also know the three qualities that from their roots, nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances onto him. Purport. Sorry, we'll repeat the translation. Because they are only matter, the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the five gross elements, and the subtle sense objects: form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. Cannot know their own nature. Who cannot know their own nature? Senses and sense objects and gross elements and what is the general term mentioned? Sorry? Matter. So matter cannot know their own nature. Why can't matter know their own nature? Yeah, because it is dull matter, we say, right? It does not have consciousness. So they cannot know their own nature. Now the second part of the translation. But the living being, please repeat. Because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life airs, the senses, the elements, and the sense objects. And he can also know the three qualities that form their roots. So who can know the body and all those things? Living entity. Why living entity can know it? Spiritual nature. So anything that is spiritual has got the potency or a tendency to understand things. Anything that is material does not have the tendency to understand things. So if we act on a material platform, what will happen? We will not understand things as they are. If we act on the spiritual platform, what will happen? We will be able to understand what things are as they are. So this is one thing that we will discuss. Why material? Because as a living entity, we have got the ability to be on the material side or on the spiritual side, because we are known as Tatashta Shakti. Tatashta means marginal potency. So we can always be on any side of the fence. We can be in the spiritual realm or we can be in the material realm. So we'll discuss this more in detail. So we were at life as elements, and he can also know the three qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. So, now the third part to this is, even though the living entity has got the ability to understand spiritual things, but still he cannot understand the Supreme Being, Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why? Is Supreme Personality of Godhead not in the spiritual realm? Question mark. Ignorance. Yeah. Ignorance is one of the answers. But there is who is omniscient and unlimited. As it is mentioned by Daksa. He is omniscient and unlimited. What does that mean? What does omniscient mean? All-knowing. And so there are three characteristics of the Supreme Lord. He is omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. So, what is omniscient? He knows everything, past, present, future. What is omnipotent? What does omnipotent mean? All pervading, yes. Unlimitedly powerful. He can act on, with any other senses he can act So he does not have to eat with his mouth only, he can eat with his eyes. So all his senses are equally powerful. So he is omniscient, omnipotent and omnipresent. He is present everywhere. And it is mentioned he is unlimited. Unlimited means? Sorry? Unlimited means unlimited, yes. So he is beyond the conscious, so he is Vibhu, where we are Anu. What does Vibhu and Anu mean? We are infinitesimally small and he is unlimitedly vast. Because of this three potencies, omniscient, omnipresent and omnipotent, he is beyond the pervade of, he cannot be understood by which is infinitesimally small living entity. So even though we are both of the spiritual nature, but still it is impossible for a living entity to understand the Supreme Lord without the mercy of the Lord. So that's, we'll come to that as well. So Daksa is saying, I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. We'll read the purport. Material scientists can make an analytical study of the physical elements, the body, the senses, the sense objects, and even the air that controls the vital force. But still they cannot understand that above all this is the real spiritual realm. In other words, the living entity, because of his being a spirit soul, can understand all the material objects, or when self-realized, he can understand the Paramatma, upon whom yogis meditate. Nevertheless, the living being, even if advanced, cannot understand the Supreme Being, the personality of Godhead, for he is Ananta, unlimited, in all six opulences. Om Agnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tashmai Shri Guruvaya Namah Shri Caitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uthapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganalalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Okay, so here in the translation we are discussing about matter, we are discussing about spirit, spiritual energy, and we are discussing about the knowledge by which we can understand the Supreme Being. And then in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is describing three kinds of living entities. The first one Srila Prabhupada is describing is material scientist. The second one Srila Prabhupada is describing is the yogis or the transcendentalists who are trying to understand the Lord. And the third kind of living entities are the, which Srila Prabhupada is not directly mentioning, but to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one has to be a devotee of the Lord. So, this verse is giving, this is part of the Hamsaguhya prayers or the prayers of Daksha. And in this verse, Haribo, Chaitanya Madhav, you sit here. Yes, please, 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 please. Quick. Yeah. Little more. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Okay. You're taking all the notes, right? I'll ask you afterwards. Huh? Because if I forget something, you remind me where I forget, okay? So, these are the prayers of Daksha. So, Daksha is offering prayers to Lord Vishnu. And this verse, specifically, he is speaking about the problem of the person. And I was so tempted to take the next verse as well with this, but probably we might not finish both the verses, and it will be injustice to the next verse, because this verse gives the problem, and the next verse, which is going to be taken tomorrow, will give the solution to this problem. So what is the problem in this verse? I mean, not there is no problem as problem, but what is the problem which is described in this verse? Anyone? Yes, the living entity, this is one of the problems which is mentioned. The living entity, even though he is capable of understanding the Lord, but he still cannot understand the Lord. What else is mentioned in this verse? That's why we read the verse before we start the class, so that we can know what is mentioned in the problem. So, in the verse. What else is mentioned? So, question is good question. The question is, what is, so in this verse, the problem is mentioned, and in the next verse, tomorrow's verse, the answer is given. So the question is, what is the problem that is mentioned in this verse? I'll read the verse again. Because they are only matter, the body, the life hairs, the external and internal senses, subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound, and touch, cannot know their own nature, the nature of the other senses, or the nature of their controllers. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life hairs, the senses, the elements, and the sense objects, and he can also know the three qualities that form their roots. Nevertheless, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances unto him. That Prabhu mentioned, living entity is not able to understand the Supreme Being. What else is mentioned? The dull matter cannot know its nature, yes. So there is another point which is mentioned in that the matter is inert, but the nature of the other senses and the nature of their controllers. So the matter cannot understand the nature of their controllers. So in that sense, material nature or matter is indiscriminatory. It does not discriminate whether it is good for us or not. So maybe we can, if we are using our senses, sense objects in the misuse them, the material nature will not reject or revolt that you are misusing us, because it does not have that capacity to understand that this is not good for the controller. Getting the point? Anyways, we'll discuss this more in detail. So, let's understand Daksha. So, this is Daksha coming from which Manvantara is going on now, right now? 6th Manvantara, sorry? Loudly. Hamsa Guhya prayers. I'm talking about the Manvantara. Which Manvantara is going on? 6th Manvantara, right? How many Manvantaras are there? 14 Manvantaras are there, right? So, when did Daksha first appear? Anyone knows? So the first time Daksha appears in 4th canto. So that was in which Manvantara? Swayambhu Manvantara, the first Manvantara. So we have to understand just the background so that we can understand the tendencies and the knowledge and the living entities and the Lord, how they all fit together. So Daksha was first seen in 4th canto of first Manvantara, which is Swayambhu Manu, along with Swayambhu Manu, and he performed Daksha Yagna. But he committed one offense, right? You all know what did he commit? What offense he committed? Lord Shiva, he offended Vaishnava, Vaishnavanam Yatha Sambhu. He did not offend just a normal living entity or a jiva or anyone. He offended the topmost Vaishnava. He offended Lord Shiva. So the reaction had to be severe. What happened? Anyone knows after that? Huh? He got a goat head. Yeah, everyone knows the pastime. That's right. So Veerabhadra came and chopped off his. Yes. Yeah, some of the Brahmanas had their mustache, half of the mustache, not only full, shaved off. I think we should change our rosters. Right. So, so he offended Vaishnava, the topmost Vaishnava, Lord Shiva, and then he got a head of the goat. And he, of course, he being a devotee of the Lord, he begged forgiveness to Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva also being topmost Vaishnava, forgave Daksha. But after that first Manvantara, he had to go and perform austerity for 5 Manvantaras. So after performing, and how long is Manvantara? A long time. Okay, we won't get into that. It's a long, long time. Daksha performed for 5 Manvantaras, he performed austerities. And then now, which we are reading, is the beginning of the 6th Manvantara. When everything was covered up, Prachetas were born, Prachetas went and performed austerities in the river, under the water. And then when they are coming back, now this is the 6th Manvantara, Chakshusha Manvantara going on. And when they are coming back, they are seeing that all this land is covered by trees. And what happens when anyone has got a garden here, small garden or plant or something? So you grow something, fruit or vegetable or flower, then slowly, slowly the weeds grow in there. And when the weeds grow, what happens? Even if you have gone to India or if you neglect the plant itself shrinks and dies, but the weeds are stronger. So the weeds don't need any efforts to grow. So similarly here we see when the Prachetas went, all the trees and shrubs and unwanted vegetation grew, but there was no fruit, flowers, grains were not there. So Prachetas tried to destroy everything by creating wind and fire and everything. At that time, Soma, the god of vegetation, came and told, the moon god, came and told Prachetas not to do that. And then the trees gave their daughter Marisha to Prachetas. And by the union of the Prachetas and the Marisha, Daksha was born. So this is coming from the first Manvantara. Daksha is, after performing so much of austerity, he comes back as Daksha in the 6th Manvantara. Now he understands what mistakes he has committed. So he's performing austerities and he's offering these prayers to Lord Vishnu. Another point to be understood here is, now Daksha again, at the end of 3rd canto, Kapil Muni explains 3 kinds of devotional service. The 3 kinds of devotional service is bhakti in the mode of goodness, bhakti in the mode of passion, and bhakti in the mode of ignorance. So Kapil Muni is explaining these three kinds of person can perform bhakti in different modes. So to explain that, Sukdev Goswami in the 4th canto is explaining these three pastimes. The first pastime he explains is of Daksha. So Daksha represents bhakti in the mode of ignorance. Because even though he was performing bhakti, he performed that yagna, but he was proud of that yagna and he offended a Vaishnava. So there is a lesson to be learned from Daksha. Daksha is interesting personality. Why? Because sometimes, and Prabhupada gives his example, if a mother-in-law wants to tell anything to his daughter-in-law, she will tell her daughter that you shouldn't do like this. And then the daughter-in-law understands that this is not to be done. So similarly, Daksha is that kind of personality. He's mentioned in Bhagavatam so that we understand what we shouldn't do in bhakti. And Daksha so offended Lord Shiva. So he is the example of bhakti in the mode of ignorance. And then the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj comes in 4th canto, which explains bhakti in the mode of passion. Why passion? Because he was performing bhakti to get something which is material. He was motivated by something which is material. Sorry? Loudly, you have to speak loudly. That's right. So after he met, he got darshan of Lord Vishnu, he became a pure devotee. And he said, what does he say after that? Do you know? That's right. So his bhakti began with passion, but then he became pure devotee. And he said, I was looking for broken pieces of glass, but now I've got a diamond. When he had the darshan of the Lord. So he is the example of bhakti in the mode of passion. And then Sukdev Goswami explains the third personality in 4th canto is Prithu Maharaj. Prithu Maharaj is the example of bhakti in the mode of goodness. And so what did he do to become example in bhakti in the mode of goodness? So Prithu Maharaj performed 100 horse sacrifices. So when he was performing 100 horse sacrifices, the 100th one was stolen by Indra. So, and it happened like 7 or 8 times, right? 7 times. Indra stole the horse. So Prithu Maharaj was not able to complete his 100th sacrifice. But then he still, his son went and brought Indra and he was about to punish. But then Lord Vishnu himself appears and says, your 100 sacrifices I have accepted. You don't need to perform. And he immediately forgave Indra and immediately did not bother performing the 100th sacrifice. So he's an example of bhakti in the mode of goodness. He was not attached to the ritual. The goal of bhakti is to see the Lord face to face. So have love of Godhead, and he already had that. And when Lord himself appeared in front of it, he was not attached to performing the 100th sacrifice. So we understand that these are the three personalities in 4th canto mentioned, exemplify bhakti in different modes. And Daksha is one who exemplifies mode of ignorance, what we shouldn't do in bhakti. So here Daksha, in this verse, which is interesting because Daksha is speaking about 3 things: Kshetra, Kshetragna, and the knowledge, Gnanam. And where have we heard this? I've already given the answer, right? Chapter 13, all the Bhakti Sastris. So, what is the name of chapter 13? Nature, enjoyer, and the consciousness. So, in that chapter, the first verse itself, Arjuna is asking Krishna, tell me about Kshetra. What is Kshetra? Kshetra means body. Then tell me about Kshetragna. Who is the knower of the body. Tell me about Prakriti, material energy. Tell me about Purusha, the Supreme Being, and Gnanam, the knowledge with which we can understand the Kshetra, Kshetragna, Prakriti and Ishvara, and Gneham, what is the object of knowledge. So he's asking these 6 questions. Arjuna is asking the 6th question to Krishna just as the beginning of 13th chapter. And this, as it is explained here, what is Kshetra? As Daksha is mentioning, it is the matter, the body, the life airs, the external and internal senses, the 5 gross elements, and the subtle sense objects, form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. So this form the Kshetra. Kshetra. And what is the characteristic of Kshetra which is mentioned in this verse? It cannot understand its own nature. Kshetra is, it does not understand its own nature, the nature of other senses, and the nature of their controllers. So, example, this is important to understand because senses will act as the controller wants them to act without discrimination. The senses will not act as it is suitable or favorable. So they will act without discrimination. The example is given, if you put a rasgulla in your mouth, what will happen if you are a healthy person? It will taste sweet, it will give you sweetness. It will not, the tongue will not say, oh, you are a diabetic patient, okay, let's not take the sweetness of the rasgulla. No. As soon as you put rasgulla in your mouth, the sweetness will act. As soon as you put chili in your mouth, it will be hot and spicy. It will not say, oh, you have got ulcers in your stomach, let's not take that. No, the senses will act indiscriminately. So this is what it means. It does not care for the good and bad results of the controller. The controller has to bear those results. It's not the senses. So then, what is the other characteristics of Kshetra? It keeps changing. So today we might be able to, when we are healthy, we are able to taste everything and take benefits. Whatever we eat, digest quickly, right? We can eat mount loads of sweets, whatever kind of food we want to eat when you are healthy. When you are in your 20s, 30s mainly, 40s, you start to dwindle. So you can eat whatever and it will digest. But as you grow older, 40 plus, 50 plus, 60 plus, you have to make your choices wisely. Otherwise, it will create problems. The sweetest of thing can create a lot of issues. So, this is the nature of Kshetra. Kshetra constantly changes, and the results which it gives is different. So, as it is mentioned in Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna mentions right in the beginning of 2nd chapter in his instructions, Dehinosmin, yatha dehe kaumaram yavanam jara, tatha dehantara prapte dhiras tatra namoyati. It keeps on changing. And as it is explained in this also, what are the characteristics of Kshetra? It is born, it grows, it sustains for a while, produces offsprings, dwindles, and death. So this is the nature of Kshetra. It keeps on changing. It is not constant. On the other hand, what is Kshetragna? Knower of the body, knower of the Kshetra. One who understands the Kshetra. Now there are 2 Kshetragnas explained in 13th chapter. One is the living entity itself, is a Kshetragna, and the other is the Supreme Lord, Paramatma or Krishna ultimately. And so they are both of the spiritual nature. Because they are of the spiritual nature, they can understand the Kshetra, they can understand the matter. Otherwise it is not possible. And they can understand the 3 qualities as it is explained in this verse. But the living being, because of his spiritual nature, can know his body, the life airs, the senses, the elements, the sense objects, and he can also know the 3 qualities that form their roots. So the 3 qualities form the roots of Kshetra. How do they form the roots of Kshetra? Because this body that we are receiving is because of the 3 modes which we chose to be in. Now in this body, if you use this body predominantly in the ignorant activities or in the mode of ignorance, what will happen? The next body that will give, next kshetra which get will be in the mode of ignorance. If we use this body mainly in the passionate way, what will happen? In the next life we will get a body which is more passionate. If we use this body in the mode of goodness, in activities which are in the mode of goodness, the next body which we will get will be in the mode of goodness. We will get a better, higher body. So, living entity or Kshetrajna can also know the three qualities that form their roots. So, nevertheless, as it is mentioned, the third part, although the living being is completely aware of them, he is unable to see the Supreme Lord, Supreme Being, who is omniscient and unlimited. So, interestingly, Bhagavad-Gita has got 5 topics. What are the 5 topics which are taught in Bhagavad-Gita? Loudly. No, Ishvara, Prakriti, Jiva, Kala and Karma. So, Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala and Karma are the 5 topics which are discussed in Bhagavad-Gita. Of this we see the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad-Gita, they mainly described Jiva. So they mainly describe the Jiva and they form the Karma section of the, they basically describe the Karma section. And they explain how the Jiva acts in the material world. What is the position of a Jiva in the material world? And it culminates into the best of the Jiva. Who is the best of the Jiva? And at the end of 6th chapter, Krishna explains who is the best of the Jiva. Yoginam api sarvesam madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yoma same yukta tamamata. So the whole first 6th chapter is basically explaining about the constitution, who the Jiva is, what his nature is, and then who is the best of the Jiva. So basically Jivas are explained in the first 6th chapter. And then in the second 6th chapter, what is explained? Ishvara mainly. Ishvara and Jiva in relationship to Ishvara. So that bhakti is the essence. And in which you see the middle 6th chapter is explaining the supreme position of the Lord, Ishvara, and how the living entity is so infinitesimally small. And then in the last 6th chapter, I would say 7th chapter, 5 chapters. So last 5 chapters is more about the Gnana, where Prakriti is explained in detail. So where it is explained how the living entity comes under the influence of the material energy and falls down into the material realm. And then Krishna in the 18th chapter concludes, and he gives the summary of the entire Bhagavad-Gita. So we have to understand this. Why is the living entity in the material world? So what is the reason the living entity is in the material world? Because of avidya. And we know that cycle which is mentioned in Nectar of Devotion. So how does avidya, because of avidya one falls down into the material world, and then there is a seed of material desire which is sown into the heart of the living entity. Yesterday, Sri Krishna Prabhu explained nicely how there are 3 bodies. There is Shushma Sarir or subtle body. There is Sthula Sarir, which is gross body, and then there is Karana, Karana Sarir, which is the cause of getting those bodies. So there is Vasana, and then there is Karma, and then there is Avidya in the Karana Sarir. So because of our unfulfilled desires and karma activities, we get this Shushma and Sthul, so gross and subtle bodies, depending on what desires we cultivate. So the reason why we are in this material world is because of that avidya. And then there is this desire, the seed, bijam, which is sown into the heart of the living entity. And because of those desires, one performs activities. One performs different activities. He performs papam. Why is it mentioned papam, not punyam as well? Because anything you perform in the material world, whether you do good or bad, good in the sense material good or bad, it will bind you. It will bind you to this material energy. So it is referred to in Nectar of Devotion, it is referred to as papam. And then for those papam you have to get reactions, again good or bad. So aprarabdha karma and prarabdha karma, which are manifested and unmanifested reactions. And depending on what reactions you get, which is this body as well, you will again perform the activities suitable to this body, and you will be, there is a seed of inclination, which is kutam. So, as it is mentioned, Prabhupada mentions, the animals don't sit together and hear Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, because their body is limited. And that is why we mentioned in the first paragraph, as it is mentioned here, the body does not have the ability to understand spiritual knowledge. So it's very important that we get a suitable body. Even in humans, we have got so many categories. Not every human can just sit and open Bhagavad-Gita and read it and understand it at first go. Even many of us might have got that experience. First time when you started Bhagavad-Gita, you couldn't get past the index. So many times we have just reading the index just to motivate ourselves. Come on, you have to read this, finish this. I remember first time when I read Bhagavad-Gita, that was because there was the only time I was motivated to read was in the train. Because that half an hour going and coming, I had nothing else to do. So I said, this is the only time I can give for Bhagavad-Gita. So I started reading there. I read it in 6, 7, 8 months. I'm not, don't remember how long, but I couldn't understand a single word of it. So even today, I don't understand Bhagavad-Gita, but still, the first time when I read, I don't know what I read. So this is, the consciousness of a living entity is so dull that you cannot understand spiritual subject matter just by approaching or getting this. So this is, as it is mentioned, our avidya needs to be dissolved. Our modes need to be dissolved. We have to come to the higher modes to understand spiritual subject matters. So that is the criteria which is for our subtle and gross bodies have to purify to come to the spiritual platform. So here in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning about 3 living entities: the material scientists, the yogis, and the devotees. So material scientists, because of their consciousness, because of their rejection of the Supreme Lord, they can never understand the Supreme Truth. The yogis, they can understand, because they are spiritually inclined, they can understand little bit, but still they can only go up to self-realization. They can only understand who the soul is, and they might even able to understand a little bit of Paramatma, the difference between soul and Paramatma. But to understand Bhagwan, who is Ananta and unlimited, one has to come to the platform of pure bhakti. Only then he can understand the Bhagwan, who is full in 6 opulences. So what are the opulences mentioned? Beauty, strength, fame, knowledge, renunciation, and wealth. So beauty, fame, wealth, strength, knowledge, and renunciation. So these are the 6 opulences. So, and that too in full. How can we understand something which is in full? So we have to come to the platform of gnanam, knowledge. And that gnanam is explained. I'll quickly summarize how gnanam, because there are 3 things. So gnanam means, as it is mentioned again in 13th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, unless you understand kshetra, kshetragna, and knowledge to understand that. So these 3 things, the kshetra soul and the super soul, these 3 things, unless you understand, you will not be able to understand the Supreme Lord. So this is what gnanam is. The example I will give for gnanam is, suppose if you are desiring to go to India or overseas, what is the first step you will do? Sorry? Visa. Yes, visa. What else? Once you get visa? Book the tickets. How will you book your tickets? Sorry? Passports, visas, yes. Right. Flight center, but you'll have to give some details to them, right? Find out the right flight timings, when you want to fly, when you want to come, and then return also, yes. Stay there. So you will plan your journey. So you will have all this flight details and visa and all this sorted out. And then what will you do? Sorry? Loudly. Go on the flight. That is important. If you book everything, but if you don't reach at the airport, what will happen? The flight will go, but you will not go anywhere. So the important thing is, when you're planning your journey, you book the flight, you plan for the flight details, you plan for all the journey. You also select which airlines you want to go through. You might not want to go through an airline which has got a record of crashing. I remember last time when there was a war, Ukraine-Russia war, one of the flights passed through that and was shot down. One of the airlines. After that time, that airlines is selling flight tickets at half the price. So because its reputation went down. The same airline in the same year, the flight got disappeared, and they don't even know till date where their flight is. In the middle of the ocean, it just disappeared, right? So the reputation goes up. So you check for which flight, who the pilot is. Of course, we don't check the pilot, but we check the reputation of the flight, because we understand that that particular flight pilots are good. So this is important. This is knowledge. Whenever you're doing something, you need to have knowledge of source, destination, how to get there, and you make all those plans. So similarly, all these details of the flight is like a kshetra. And then you are the jiva. You have to go and board the plane. That is jiva, has to go and board the plane. And who is the super soul compared to the pilot? Even though we don't know the pilot, and most of the time we don't care. And similarly in our body, when we act, we don't care about the super soul. We act indiscriminately. But it is important to understand who the super soul is. If it is important to understand who we are, and it is important to understand the kshetra, only then we can advance in spiritual life. So if we understand all these details, we'll reach our destination. So this is the example, and there are two more examples given. I'll quickly explain. Another example is given about the sky. In 13th chapter it is given. The sky, when you look outside, when you go onto the beach and look at the sky, what will you see? Sky meeting the ocean, sky meeting the buildings, horizon, right? So at what point does the sky meet the ocean? At what point? They meet the ocean at the horizon? So if you go there, will the sky meet the ocean? Then it does see like that, right? That it is meeting the ocean. It moves. It moves away when you move. Yeah. So this is the understanding. Bhagavad-Gita gives the example like a person sees the sky meeting the ocean, but in reality it does not meet. So that is knowledge. That is real knowledge. To understand that something which is there but it is illusory. Similar, the second example is given. Even though the sun is within the universe, but it's still different. Its light is spread all over the universe, but it's still different. So similarly, we have to understand, even though Paramatma is sitting within the body and the soul is sitting within the body, the soul and the Paramatma are different to the body. So these are the examples given in Bhagavad-Gita, which explains kshetra, kshetrajna and knowledge by which we can understand this. So I'll stop here. Any questions, comments? Sorry, it was more of a technical class than, because this is, tomorrow will be the solution which is more applicable to how we can approach this, how we can tackle this problem. Yes? Hare Krishna. Okay, so the question, if I have understood right, is, as I mentioned, you need knowledge to go back home, back to Godhead, but Krishna is saying Sankhya knowledge is not necessary to go back home, back to Godhead. Yeah, of course, the Sankhya, so what is Sankhya knowledge? Yeah, so Sankhya knowledge is to understand that we are not the body, we are the spirit soul. So, as Kapil Muni is explaining in the 3rd canto, the Sankhya knowledge should culminate into bhakti. So we can, and this is one of the things we can see when the scientists study the bodily constituent ingredients, they will say, okay, so body consists of hydrogen, nitrogen, potassium, all these ingredients. So finally they come to the conclusion that this body is made out of chemicals. So that is Sankhya knowledge. So when you take individual parts, you come to the conclusion body is made out of this kind of chemicals. So that is Sankhya knowledge. So Sankhya knowledge itself is not sufficient to go back home, back to Godhead, or even to practice devotional life. So we have to come to the platform of, by Sankhya knowledge and the knowledge, and that is why I mentioned all three have to be together. Kshetra, the field of activity, which is Sankhya knowledge, will bring you to the understanding of what the body is. Kshetragna. Kshetragna is, as we mentioned, there are two Kshetragnas, soul and Paramatma or Krishna. So we have to have the knowledge of them as well, and that complete knowledge will bring you to devotional life and will take you back home, back to God. So it's not only Sankhya knowledge, but along with Sankhya you need knowledge of the soul and super soul. So that knowledge, and that is why it is mentioned knowledge is important. It's not that knowledge is not important. Knowledge is important, because without knowledge, without scriptures, you cannot understand those things. But it's a transcendental knowledge. It's not material science. It's a spiritual science. We have to understand. Yeah, answers the question. Any other questions, comments?
So that means in the spiritual world.
Sorry?
That means in the spiritual world, it says everything is conscious in the spiritual world.
That's right.
So that means, well, if everything is spiritual, that means everything is conscious.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, as we, thank you for bringing out that point. As we discussed in the beginning, anything that is spiritual has got consciousness, and in the spiritual world, everything is spiritual. And everything that is why is conscious. There is nothing like, even the dust of, the speck of sand is conscious. Even the trees are conscious. They understand Krishna's mood, and they provide that kind of fruits and flowers and to Krishna. So yeah, thank you for bringing that point. Thank you. Okay, we'll stop here. Granth Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you.